On that note, we're going to start 7.1. Measurement estimating. Estimating is we're taking some educated guesses, estimating the actual and scale distances. We will find some exacts as well, but we'll also do some estimating. So just make sure you're reading the questions correctly when you do that. Something you need to know about this scale. So a scale equals, when you're looking at a map, so some of these questions in this section have to do with a map, equals the distance, and this is going to be the top of a ratio here. Distance on map always goes on top. Always goes on top. When you measure the distance on the map. So that's going to be in centimeters or inches, right? Because you measure it on a piece of paper or out of your book. Is in relation to the distance in real life. So typically on a map, you might measure something as an inch, and in real life, that might represent 2 miles or 10 miles. Right? That's always how it's going to be laid out. Okay? So how do we write this? You've got an example where it says 10 miles in life is 1 inch on map. So what would we put on top? 1 inch. And we're including units because inches is different than miles. So we have 1 inch over 10 miles. And we can abbreviate. As long as you keep your abbreviations the same. If you want to write out the whole word, that's fine. There are 3 ways we can write this. Okay? Fraction way, ratio as a fraction. Another way that you might see it is 1 inch and then you have colon and 10 miles. That is very typical that you would see on a map that you would see in your desk atlas. Probably has it that way, the second way. The third way is a little different than what we've done in rates. We used the word 2 before. We're just going to use an equal sign. So 1 inch equals 10 miles. So 1 inch on the map equals 10 miles in real life. So how many would 2 inches equal in real life? 20 miles. And we would 3 inches? 30 miles, right? That's for this scale. Okay? So writing the scale. Okay? All right. This scale that we just wrote had inches on it. My suggestion for you, whenever you do this, unless the problem tells you to use inches, I would, when you set the scale for yourself, when you get to set it, I would use centimeters, cm, centimeters, which is the metric system. I know you guys don't like that as much on the map because it'll probably make it way easier for you. I don't say that because I want you to struggle through metric system. I say that because that will make it easier in the long run for you. So if you have the choice, measure in centimeters. Okay? So you might get a question that says on a map, you measure a distance of 100 miles to be 5 centimeters long. Estimate the scale. So you measured 5 centimeters and said that's about 100 miles. So what do you think? What would my ratio be for this?
5 centimeters over 100 miles.
5 centimeters over 100 miles. Okay, good. Now, another thing about scale, what do you notice about the top of the first example? We always had what on top?
The centimeter.
What number's on the top? What number is it on top? Example 1. Example 1.
5.
What number is on the top on example? The number 1. Okay.
Where?
So we want to try to get one of those to be equal to 1. Because it's a lot easier to think about 1 centimeter to a certain number of miles versus 5 centimeters. Because you might measure 6 centimeters or 7 centimeters. So if 5 centimeters is 100 miles, how much is 1 centimeter?
Are we doing the dividing thing?
So you could set this up like a proportion, right?
It's like 20.
Yeah, 20.
How'd you get that?
20 miles. How do you get that?
You later.
Did you do 100 divided by 5? Yeah. Because 100 times 1, that's your cross multiplication.
So it's kind of like like rate.
Kind of like a ratio and rate, right?
Unit, like whatever it's called.
So that works. Or you could write it a different way. You could say 1 mile equals, not 1 mile, I apologize for that. 1 centimeter equals 20 miles. There is one more way we can write this one. One more way to write it would be 1 centimeter to 20 miles. You don't have to write it all 3 ways unless it says write it 3 ways like the first few questions do.
I have a question.
So 3 ways to write it.
What do you prefer?
I don't really care.
Okay.
Okay? It does not matter to me. I would probably gravitate, usually pick the fraction one because then I can make proportions out of it really easy. But it doesn't matter. Okay? Before we do example 3, go underneath example 3. Actually, do you have a little room on the bottom of your page or not? Not really. Okay, we're going to do another example right here. So right underneath that, kind of in this space here. We'll kind of scrunch it in there.
I'm gonna go in.
Because we didn't really estimate with that. It told us 5 centimeters is 100 miles. So that wasn't really an estimate. That's an exact. If you were to maybe be given like 192 kilometers is 2 centimeters. Okay, so and they said write that as a scale or estimate the scale. So estimate the scale. I would, if I were you, start with my 2 centimeters. That's pretty simple. But instead of 192, what could you make that?
190.
You could do 190. I'd probably go to 200 though, because I'm estimating, right? It's a little bit off. 190 would be okay as well. I mean, you could do it with 192. It would work, but
Would it be harder?
we're estimating. Maybe we didn't measure exact. So this is 1 centimeter is how many kilometers then?
One is 96.
Yeah. The other one would be 96, right? So when it says estimate, you can round one of the numbers to a nice to divide number. Okay? Not that you can't do it without it, but estimating, we can try to make it a little easier on yourself. That's my little side note. Okay. So let's go on to example 3. Technically now example 4 because it's our 4th one, but you get the picture. All right. A map has a scale. So they're telling us what the scale of the map is. So they're saying it's 1.5 inches for every 20 miles. That's the scale. How far apart are 2 houses that are 3.75 inches apart? So this is where you're going to use proportions. That equals, am I going to put inches on top or on bottom? On top, because I already have inches on top in the original one. 3.75 inches. And we're trying to find X miles. We're trying to figure out X. So we did a lot of these. What I'd like to see is 1.5 times X equals 20 times 3.75. Still 1.5x equals, and that's 75. I'll do the math for you fast because I already did it earlier. And then what do I do now? 1.5 times x, so I got to divide.
Divide
1.5 by 1.5, then divide 1.5.
And
divide
x
75.
equals, and that equals 50. And is it going to be miles or inches? Miles, because that's where my x is. So make sure you get the correct units on there. When it comes to units, it's mostly important. I really want to make sure you can do the math correctly. So always line up inches on top if inches are on top, miles on bottom if miles are on bottom. Okay? As long as you line them up correctly, you'll get the right number in the end. So first, it's writing the scale different ways. Okay, that was the first example. How can you write things different way? Second one and the extra one we're estimating. Okay, and finding a scale by giving some numbers. The third example there is taking a scale and a measurement and figuring it out.